Welcome back to another PS5 Jailbreak news update. This should be a quick one here because I did say that I wanted to update you guys once we had some more information about the new PS5 kernel vulnerability that could lead to a new jailbreak in the PS5 for a higher firmware. So there have been a number of updates on this. So this is the FreeBSD bug that I initially covered. So there's been a few updates so far. Firstly, we thought that this may affect the PS4 as well, but that has since turned out not to be the case because the PS4 is running an older version of FreeBSD, FreeBSD 9, and this affects newer versions, including the PS5, which is running FreeBSD 11. So this is not going to affect the PS4, but it will affect the PS5. Now, the other big question is what firmware this is actually going to apply to on the PS5. We weren't sure since this is a relatively new discovery from FreeBSD, this vulnerability. They've only just found out about it. There was a possibility it could work all the way up to the latest PS5 firmwares. And then on top of that, we also got the release of new system software updates for the PS4 and PS5, bringing the latest firmware on the PS4 up to 12.0, and the latest firmware for the PS5 is now 10.0. So this new update coming out just about a day after this critical security flaw would suggest that perhaps this is the update that they quickly pushed out to patch the vulnerability. However, that turned out not to be the case because there's no mention in any of the update notes here about them patching any vulnerabilities. Normally they would mention in the update notes that they've made some security fixes to the system software, but that is not in the update notes for the 10.0 update. So it looks like they have not patched any vulnerabilities with this new version, and this version was, I believe, in beta for a while, so it was due to release any time. So it looks like they just happened to drop it. So it may just be a coincidence that they dropped this update a couple of days after this critical security flaw. And we pretty much have that confirmed now because we know the firmware that is actually vulnerable to this exploit. We know when they patched it, and unfortunately it was patched quite a while ago. So Flats broke the silence on this, saying that it looks like 7.61 is the latest vulnerable version for the UMTX bug, just for your information. And this appears to have been confirmed by others in the scene, like Spectre, who says that it's kind of wild that Sony doesn't seem to care about anyone else in the BSD ecosystem to upstream vulnerability fixes and hoards them so they don't get in 0 days. I'm obviously biased, but it's still something I'd be kind of pissed about if I was in the BSD community. So yeah, just referring to the fact that Sony obviously knew about this going back a whole year and patched it in the PS5 about a year ago. And yet, despite this, Sony did not seem to inform anybody else about this vulnerability, which left other systems that use FreeBSD vulnerable to this for over a year when Sony clearly knew about it. So that is a bit wild that they never bothered to kind of inform anybody else about this. So that is a little disappointing, especially if you are on a 8.x firmware or a 9.x firmware on your PS5. It looks like this is not going to apply to you, but if you're on a 5.x, 6.x or 7.x firmware, then this will apply and hopefully we'll get a new jailbreak up to firmware 7.61. It is also curious that 7.61 happens to be the latest firmware that's vulnerable to this, because that also just happens to be the latest firmware that is vulnerable to the Blu-ray drive exploit, the BD Jailbreak exploit. It makes me wonder if perhaps there was some kind of report to Sony that involved chaining the Blu-ray drive exploit with this kernel exploit at the same time, and that's how they patched them both in the same update, perhaps. But I don't know, that's just speculation on my part. But anyway, that is the latest information regarding that. So this new exploit will work up to 7.61. We still need it to be exploited on the PS5. We need some kind of exploit chain because it still needs to be triggered from a userland exploit. So I suspect the Blu-ray drive exploit will probably be the first thing that is tried to chain it with, since it works all the way up to 7.61, so it would be the logical choice. Hopefully we can also get some kind of WebKit implementation. The last known proper WebKit exploit for the PS5, I believe, is the PS3 exploit. I think that only works up to 5.0 or 5.50, somewhere around there. Not a very high firmware, which wouldn't be an ideal solution for this. And then also there's the Mastercore exploit, that is still being worked on. So perhaps some kind of chain with either Mastercore or PS3 on older firmwares and, BD Jailbreak for higher firmwares up to 7.61, or hopefully some other WebKit vulnerabilities that are being tested at the moment can turn into full-on WebKit exploits and be chained with this up to a high enough firmware. Because obviously triggering this through the WebKit would be a lot more convenient for everybody than having to use a Blu-ray disc, because not everybody has a disc edition console and cannot run the Blu-ray drive exploit. And then just the hassle of having to burn new discs every time something gets updated is not particularly, the best. But a WebKit exploit would be better, but BD Jailbreak is definitely better than nothing. So yeah, hopefully we'll get some kind of implementation of this fairly soon. Now, unfortunately, there's a lot of people posting stuff that is pretty much useless. Like there was this overflow WebKit memory leak that a lot of people were posting to that's basically a nothing burger. And then on top of that, you also have, various people testing WebKit vulnerabilities, and just because it says not enough free system memory, they seem to think that that means their console's vulnerable, which obviously is not necessarily the case. Just because you overload the browser's memory and it crashes, just crashing the browser does not mean you have something that's a valid exploit for the PS5. So yeah, it still remains to be seen if we can get a valid WebKit exploit to chain with this. Hopefully it will happen, but if not, there's always the Blu-ray drive exploit, there's MasterCore, there's other options for chaining with this new kernel vulnerability. So anyway, that's it for this one, 7.61. That's going to be what looks like the latest jailbreakable firmware for the PS5. Hopefully, if this can be turned into a jailbreak. So that's where things stand right now. So hope you guys enjoyed this video or found this information useful. If you did, please leave a like and subscribe. And once again, I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one.